Testing.
Hello,
Can you hear me?
Yes, keeping well, thank you. You too?
Okay, we're good to go. It's 10 o'clock. So welcome to the meeting of the CFA. It's broadcast on YouTube, this is, and is available for viewing after the meeting. The link's available on the CFA website. Due to the current situation, the meeting is held entirely remotely with all members joining online. Just the normal reminders, can I ask you all to mute your microphones until you're invited to speak or wish to speak, and to use your video camera for the duration of the meeting because it looks better for people that log in. If members or officers wish to speak, use the raise your hand function and hopefully I'll be able to see it. Let me just check that I can. Yes, I can see it. If at any point the webcast fails and we'll be told that it's failed, please stay online while the problem is fixed. If a vote is required, you'll be asked to indicate if you are for or against. Please speak clearly when asked. Please ensure that mobile phones are switched off or silent. We'd like to welcome to the meeting the visitors. There's Gavin Barker from Mazars. If you remember Mazars from previously, there are new external auditors and they're a lot better than the last lot we had. We're also joined by Matthew Wallace, who's the Director of Estates and Building Services at the City Council. That's Leicester City Council, who will be presenting to us today. Because we're online, I have to do a roll call to make sure that all members can see and hear everyone else. So I'm going to be starting off in alphabetical order. So it'll be Councillor Barton first.
I'm here. I'm Councillor Susan Barton from Leicester City Council.
Thank you, Sue. Ian Bentley.
I think we're just trying to connect Mr. Bentley.
As usual. Let's move on then. Let's go to you, Ken.
Yes, indeed. Councillor Kenneth Bull, representing Rutland, all present and here, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, Ken. Bill?
Yes, here, Chairman.
Thanks. John Coxon, that is.
Yeah, present and correct, Chairman.
Great. Councillor Fonseca?
Yes, Chairman.
Thank you.
Chairman.
Thank you very much. Dan? I saw you there, Dan. Switch your microphone on.
Yes, sorry about that. Good morning, Chairman. Dan Harrison, representing Ibstock and Appleby.
Thank you. Corwinder?
Hi, Councillor Corwinder Singh Johar, representing Rowley Fields. I hope you can hear me now.
We can, Corwinder. Gerald or Jeffrey, I always get it the wrong way around. Mr. Kaufman?
Good morning, Chair. Yes, Jeffrey Kaufman, representing Oadby.
Very good. Bill Licorice?
Morning, Chairman. Bill Licorice, County Council.
Thank you. Michael?
Morning, Chairman. Michael Mullaney, Leicester County Council, present and can hear. Okay, cheers.
Betty?
Betty Newton, Leicestershire County Council.
Ted Parsons absent, so we've got a substitute, which is Richard.
Morning, Chairman. Richard Shepherd, Leicestershire County Council, subbing, if you say, for Ted Parton.
Yep. Ray Bhatia.
Good morning, Chairman. Representing Beaumont Leys, Leicester City Council.
Thank you. Councillor Thalduka.
Councillor Talukdar. Good morning, Chair. Councillor Aminur Talukdar, Leicester City Council, Stonygate Ward. Thank you.
And Maggie Wright has phoned in that she's ill today, so we're one short and we've no substitute because it was very late notification. Can I just go back to you now, Ian? Are you there? I see you've sent me a text. Ian Bentley. Ian, your microphone's off. Well, I don't know what to do about Ian. He sent me a text. He says he can hear me and he can see me, but he can't speak to me. So shall we? Oh, hang on. He sent me something else. Shall we just move on? Yes, he said yes, he can hear and see. Right, let's move on. So under apologies for absence, we've got obviously Maggie, who's ill, and as you know, Richard Shepherd substituting for Ted. So declarations of interest. Anybody got any? Just raise your hand if you have. Nope. Good. To advise of any items which are urgent, I have no urgent items. Chairman's announcements, you've got a copy, and I've got them here, and I'm just going to call Callum just to run through a couple of new people. The other stuff is just as per the printout. So Callum, do you want to talk about the new staff?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, members. Obviously, you can read the Chairman's announcements as you see them. It's just to highlight that we have 2 new starters joining the senior team in October. That's Georgina Coop, who's coming in to be the Head of Personal and Organisational Development, and Carl Bowden, who's coming in to lead the Safer Communities Group. So we're looking forward to welcoming them in October. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, and welcome to you, Callum. Callum's been to see me for a chat. Has he been to see you, Colwinder?
Not yet, but it's in the pipeline.
Very good. He's a nice chap, Colwinder. I'm sure we'll get on well with him. Right, moving on then. Public participation. We haven't got any received. So 6 is the minutes from the 29th of July. These are on pages 5 to 12 of your agenda, and I move that the minutes of the meeting held on that date be taken as read, confirmed, as signed. Can you second them, Colwinder?
I'll second that.
Are we all happy?
Yes.
Great, thank you. 7, our first item is a report on the Statement of Accounts and Annual Governance. This is on pages 13 to 154 of your agenda item. As you know, Alison Greenhill is our Treasurer, and Gavin Barker, the guy from Mazars, our external auditor, is here as well. They will both present or say something about the report. But first, we're going to call you, Alison, and then you'll introduce Gavin. Alison.
Thank you, Chair. I'm very pleased to bring what is an annual report of Statement of Accounts. And the reason I'm particularly pleased this year is, as you will recall a year ago, this was not a happy report. I presented a set of accounts with a fairly damning and quite rightly so auditor's report that accompanied it. This year you have the annual accounts for approval and the annual governance statement for approval, and the external auditor's report. I'm going to hand over to Gavin, so Gavin can. I think the important thing is not the accounts themselves, but actually the auditor's opinion on our accounts. Yeah. I would just like to thank in advance Gavin and the Mazars team for what has been exemplary partnership working, to be fair. So we took it on the chin last year for our shortcomings. We worked very hard to produce a quality set of accounts and work proactively with our auditors, who have been very supportive. So I'll hand over to Gavin, Chair.
Okay, Gavin, go ahead and welcome.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Alison. I would just echo Alison's comments. Actually, it's a delight to be able to present this report this morning because, as Alison said, there's been a full process of engagement between ourselves and your officers during the year. In fact, since the last meeting where we presented our last report, we've been working behind the scenes with your officers to get to this position today. And I wouldn't underestimate the amount of work that your officers have had to put in to produce a set of financial statements like the ones that's presented to you today. I'd particularly like to thank, as well as Alison, Amy Oliver from the City Council, who's overseen the process of producing the accounts this year, and Nick Alderman and his team at the Fire Brigade, who've also been instrumental in making the improvements that were reflected in this year's accounts and this year's audit work. It was difficult circumstances this year because of the pandemic and the lockdown. The audit has been completed entirely remotely, but it's worked really well. The technology's worked really well for us, and we've been able to do that effectively. I think I'd like to emphasise that despite the pandemic, there's been no relaxation in the standards that have been applied. That's either in the production of your own financial statements by your officers and the teams working with you, or in the rigour of the audit. It's all been applied the same way as it would be any year. I'm going to make reference to the report. I'll make reference to the page numbers as I go through our report. Page 132 of your pack, page 3 of our report, is our summary. So we're in a position now where we expect to be able to issue an unqualified opinion on your financial statements. And we also anticipate being able to issue an unqualified value for money conclusion. On page 133 of your packs, we summarise the status of the audit at the point at which we wrote our report. I can update you on a couple of areas as right now. The work on pensions is almost complete. We have one or two final checks to do. The work on property, plant and equipment, which is recorded there as not being quite completed at the time that we've written our report, that work is now completed. On whole of government accounts, we aren't able to complete that work yet because National Audit Office that runs the whole of government accounts process hasn't yet issued the guidance for auditors to carry out. So we won't be able to sort of issue a certificate to formally conclude the audit until National Audit Office have told us what to do around whole of government accounts, and we've actually done it. So that will hold up the issue of the certificate. And on pensions, forgot to mention when I was talking about pensions earlier, we're still awaiting the assurance that we get from the pension fund auditor. So that's the auditor of Leicestershire Pension Fund. We need that assurance before we can issue our opinion on the financial statements and our value for money conclusion. We can't do that until we get that pension fund auditor assurance. We've been in communication with the pension fund auditor. They have indicated that they expect to report to us in the latter part of October. So although you will be invited to approve the financial statements today as part of today's meeting, we won't be able to issue our opinion until we receive that audit assurance. So that will hold the process up, and it's important that I do state that while the audit remains open, there is also always the opportunity for other issues to arise. These would generally be things that come left of field as national issues. I would like to say it's unlikely. I think it probably is unlikely, but it's not unheard of for things to emerge in these periods while the audit's left open. So that's the sort of status of the audit at the moment. So turning now to the work that we did on the financial statements, on page 134 of your packs, we talk about the significant risks that were identified as part of the audit. These significant risks are common on all of our audits, apart from one in your case, which I'll mention when I get to it. The management override of controls is the risk that however good the systems of internal control the authority has in place, management is in a unique position to override those controls. So we carry out specific work, which is noted in our report, to ensure that that hasn't happened. And I'm pleased to report that there was no evidence from our work of management override of controls. Moving next to property, plant and equipment valuations. This is an area where we carry out significant work. It's a significant risk because of the high degree of estimation and the use of external experts in the figures that are reflected in your financial statements. Because of the COVID-19 pandemic, the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors suggested to all valuers that they disclose a material valuation uncertainty in their valuation reports, which your valuer duly did. Our firm's policy is that where there is a material valuation uncertainty disclosed in the valuer's report, that should be reflected in the financial statements, which it is. And we also need to draw attention to it in our report, our formal audit report on the statements. It's just to draw attention to the reader, the importance of that statement of material valuation uncertainty. It's not a qualification, it's not a modification of the formal audit report. It's just an emphasis of matter relating to that disclosure. I would actually like to say that we've done a lot of work around valuations, and although that disclosure is there, given the nature of the assets held by the Fire Authority, we think it's unlikely that there are significant issues arising in terms of uncertainty around your property valuations. Just moving on to pensions, which was the next significant risk. Again, that's a significant risk because of the estimation uncertainty involved, because of the use of actuaries, because of the use of assumptions that can have a significant impact on the amounts that are disclosed in your financial statements. So we're required to carry out a lot of work in relation to that. There was an amendment to the financial statements, a late amendment, and I'll come on to mention that in a little bit more detail in a moment. Moving on to the final significant risk, which was, I mentioned all the other significant risks are common to all of our audits. This one was tailored to you, and this was because of the difficulties that Alison mentioned earlier that we experienced on last year's audit. We have recorded there, and we are very grateful for the cooperation and joint working, that those issues were fully addressed this year, and there are no outstanding matters to draw to your attention. Moving on to pages 138 and 139, where we talk about the qualitative aspects of the authority's accounting practices and significant issues that were discussed with management. We're very happy that your accounts comply with the requirements of the CITFA code, and that everything's fully disclosed in those statements. We did receive the financial statements on the 6th of August. The working papers were of good quality and were much improved from last year, and we've had the cooperation of management throughout the audit. There's been good responsiveness to any queries that we raised, and it really has been a constructive and productive process. In terms of the significant matters discussed with management, once again this year, there were issues arising in relation to pensions. The first of these was in relation to the McLeod judgment, and this led to an amendment to your statements. Members may recall that the McLeod judgment figured significantly in last year's audit as well. This year, there was a change between the figures that were reflected in your initial draft financial statements and the ones that are in your final statements. This is because Treasury launched a consultation on the proposed remedy in the McLeod case in July, and actuaries had to revisit their estimates to see how close they were to the proposed remedy. And in Gad's case, they indicated that there was likely to be a material difference because the proposed remedy was different to that which they reflected in their estimates. So you sought a revised actuarial report, and some adjustments were made to the statements. It actually reduced the liability in this case. In terms of the local government pension scheme, it was also indicated that there was an overstatement of the liability, but as the best estimate of that was not material, we agreed that the accounts didn't need to be amended in that respect. And yet another pensions case arose in the summer, the Goodwin case, and we had to consider whether that impacted upon your disclosures around pensions. And as described in the report, the view of the actuary, Gard, in relation to the firefighters' pension scheme was that there wouldn't be any additional liability arising from the Goodwin case, but the view of Hymans Robertson, your local government pension scheme actuary, was that there would be an additional liability, but it was very difficult to estimate what that would be at the present time. But they did indicate that it was in the region of 0.1% to 0.2% of the local government pension scheme total liability. So because that only amounted to 40 to 80,000 and was well below materiality, no amendments were made to the financial statements for that, which is a sensible course of action. Just recording on the bottom of page 139 that we didn't have to exercise any of our sort of powers, formal powers, and no local electors or other parties exercised any rights to question us about the accounts or raise objections. Pages 140 of your pack and 141 of your pack relate to internal control recommendations. I won't go into these in any detail. These all related to the issues that were identified last year, and our report just records that they've been fully addressed this year and there are no internal control issues to raise this year. Page 13 summarises unadjusted and adjusted misstatements. In the unadjusted misstatements, there was one non-material error that was identified that hasn't been amended for in the accounts, and that's an appropriate course of action. And the adjusted misstatement is entirely that to do with the revised GAD report, which I mentioned earlier. So although it's reported as an adjusted misstatement, it isn't really an error by officers. It's just that new information arose between the accounts being drafted and the final version being prepared. So that reflects the amendments there. Page 143 highlights other disclosure amendments that were made to the statements, and there's nothing particularly significant that I wish to draw to your attention. On page 144, we move away from the audit of the financial statements to the other main area of our work, which is known as the value for money conclusion. And it's our conclusion as to whether the authority has made proper arrangements for securing economy, efficiency and effectiveness in its use of resources. We're guided here by National Audit Office in terms of the guidance that we follow. The criteria that we look at are informed decision making, sustainable resource deployment, and working with partners and other third parties. And in our report, we've included narrative on each of those areas, which does indicates that the authority does have proper arrangements in place, and hence the unqualified conclusion. I do just want to highlight that our conclusion is around arrangements in the 2019-20 financial year, so the year ending 31st of March. COVID has clearly been a significant issue for the authority, but that hasn't been fully considered as part of this conclusion because the lockdown only started in the final week of March, and the main implications occur in the 2020-21 financial year. So that'll feature in our audit next year when we look at the value for money conclusion arrangements. However, having said that, in our regular updates with officers, we have been keeping in touch on the measures that have been taken to respond to COVID. And as far as we can see, the good arrangements have been put in place and the authorities responded well to the challenges of COVID. On the value for money conclusion, I just really want to highlight one thing, and that is around sustainable resource deployment. We believe the authority is well positioned in financial terms and financial sustainability, but we can see the authority faces the continuing challenge of uncertainty over future funding position. Until the future funding is clarified for the authority and a settlement is made on a longer basis than year to year, it's going to be very difficult for the authority to do its medium-term financial planning. There needs to be more certainty, but that's clearly not within the authority's gifts. We're waiting for sort of government measures, comprehensive spending review, and all those other things that have been promised for some time now and have been delayed also by the pandemic. The appendices, the draft management representation letter, is a standard letter that we request from the Chief Financial Officer. We don't actually need that letter until we're in a position to sign off. So when we've got the pension fund auditor assurance and we're in a position to sign off, we'll ask Alison to provide us with that letter, and that'll give us assurance around these issues right up to the point at which we sign off on the financial statements. Appendix B is our draft auditor's report, and the only thing to highlight in that report is the emphasis of matter paragraph, which draws attention, as I mentioned earlier, to the disclosure of material valuation uncertainty, which is in note 15 to the financial statements. And as I said earlier, we won't be able to issue this report until we get the pension fund auditor assurance. On the final page of the draft auditor report, we mention the either or options when we issue our report, depending on whether we've got the whole of government accounts issue that I mentioned earlier, where we're waiting for National Audit Office guidance resolved. If we have, at the point that we come to sign off, we'll be able to issue the certificate as part of the auditor's report. If we can't, we'll issue the auditor's report highlighting the delay in the certificate that completes the audit, and we'll then provide that at a later date when we're in a position to do so. And we'll report all the outcomes of this in a letter to the Treasurer, which will ask to be circulated to all members of the authority when we are in a position to sign off, so members can see the final position once it's been resolved. And finally, Appendix C highlights our independence. We hold our independence dear. It's really important to our work that we are independent and objective. We haven't identified any threats to that independence, and we're just confirming that to members. So members have spent some time going through our report. I think it's important that the auditor always explains the work that's been undertaken and the outcomes. So I thank you for your time, and I'm quite happy to take any questions or listen to any comments that members have. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Gavin. It was certainly comprehensive. We recognise your independence and we recognise your objectivity. And compared to our last auditors, in my view, you're very good, and hopefully members will support the letter of representation. Before I call a couple of speakers, can I just ask what's happening with the letter of audit assurance from the County Council? Can you answer that for me? I think that's for Alison.
Apologies, Chair. No, I can't. I've not had an update on where we are with that. Obviously, it affects not just fire; it affects a number of authorities. So, I will find out where we are and ensure that members of the CFA are notified.
Thank you. Well, luckily we've got Lauren Haslam on the call, who's number 2 to John Sinner. I'm sure she'll chase it up for you. Right. In terms of court speakers, in order that hands were indicated, I've got Richard Shepherd first, then Bill Bolter. So Richard, go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman. As the Goodwin case has been mentioned, I will say, for the sake of transparency, I receive a teacher's pension. I welcome advice from Lawrence, but it's a formal interest to declare, or just a matter of fact.
Noted, Richard. Let's go to Bill. Let's hope he doesn't have a pension.
Unfortunately not, Chairman. Yeah, I'm pleased with the report this year. It's much better than last year. I did make comment last year, actually, that as we were disappointed with the audit last year, was there any recompense from the auditors? Because they did charge us a quite significant fee. We weren't very happy with their report. Did we manage to follow that up and see if we did get any money back off them?
Alison, did we get anything from them? They were certainly rubbish.
Yeah, the year before, I think the issue in question was our previous auditors, KPMG, who we were you expressed dissatisfaction with. The public sector auditor appointments is the organisation that manages the contracts, and I did formally complain to them regarding the standard of the audit. It is being dealt with by them. As I said at the time, I think I wouldn't hold your breath. Our audit fees are relatively low compared to both the county and the city and some of the districts. So no, the answer is no. We haven't had any recompense. But as I did say at the time, KPMG have no local authority or fire authority audit contracts. So I suppose our reassurance is that they are not auditing anywhere else at the moment.
No, I wouldn't have thought they'd get any either. Richard, take your hand down. Kilwinder? You had your hand up, Kilwinder.
Yeah, apologies. I was just going to say, puts me in a better position, understanding the audit this time round. And from my professional background, that's what I do, auditing, but in a different field. So I'm assured, going away from this meeting, that our accounts and the auditing process has followed due process, and we've got a good outcome.
Okay, we've got no other speakers, so we've got some recommendations. I'll move them. The audit completion report as presented by Gavin from Mazars be noted. Statement accounts be adopted. Annual governance statement 1920 be approved. That we give Alison authority to sign the letter of representation, because I think Mazars are very good, as soon as she can. And either significant improvements made by the authority in working practices since the presentation of the 2019 report be noted. And can I also ask for it to be minuted that we formally thank Amy Oliver and Nick Alderman for their work, otherwise they'll go unrecognised. So if I move that, will you second, Colwinder?
I'll second that.
Are we all happy? Can we all just raise our hands?
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Gavin. You've done excellent work for us, and you can stay if you'd like to, but if you want to go, we understand you've got other fish to fry. So thank you very much, Gavin.
Thank you, Chair. I will leave now, but thank you for those comments. They're much appreciated.
Indeed.
Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Right, next we have the report on the Training Facility Service Leadership and Development Centre project update. This will be presented to you by the Interim Chief Fire Officer, which is Callum. This is on pages 155 to 162 of your agenda pack. So we've got Matthew Wallace here today. He's the Director of Estates and Building Service at Leicester City Council. You're going to present the report. Callum, do you want to introduce, or shall we move straight to Matthew?
Chairman, if you're happy, I'll move straight to Matthew. Thank you.
Okay, go ahead, Matthew. Let's have a look at you.
Great stuff. Can everybody see me? Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Callum. So good morning, everybody. I'm Matt Wallace. I'm Director of Estates at Leicester City Council, supporting the Combined Fire Authority and Leicester Fire and Rescue Service with their estate strategy and other work such as this, the proposed training facility services. So as Chair touched on, we're talking about the paper on 155 to 162 on the agenda pack that Anna Paul issued. I appreciate the paper's quite dry, actually. So what I've done is some slides, hopefully just to bring it to life a little bit and talk through now. So if everybody's OK, I'll share those slides on screen now and talk to those slides. They will be available for people after the meeting's complete. So can everybody see my screen?
Not yet, not yet, Matthew, but we might be able to in a minute. Aha, we can now see it, Matthew.
Fantastic, great stuff. Okay, so I'll just run through these slides, if I may. So just really introducing it. The aim that we had was to for this paper was just to update the CFA on progress of the design and build of the services new training facility, and really just put us up to date in terms of where we've got to on that, and really the objectives that we're looking at the end of this short presentation will be that hopefully everybody will be updated in terms of the background, where we've got to date, the current status that we're sitting at the moment, what movement, an update on what we've actually done in that period since the last CFA meeting, and then I'm going to touch briefly on some of the project risks, and then finally talk over the recommendations that we've got both in the paper and just repeated here in the presentation. So just moving in terms of the background, I just wanted to start with a little bit of the history, really. Back in September 2019, we actually started to talk about a consolidated site and agreed a concept in terms of bringing all the learning and development and training facilities together. And we had an optimum site. The plans and images you can see there were from a site at Beaumont Leys. Unfortunately, those investigations sort of drew up a blank in terms of the budget. So we were looking at 10.1 million for that scheme you can see in front of you there. But more critically for us, it was suboptimal in terms of the integrated risk management planning, and when you led the heat mapping in terms of where the optimum location of this would be, it didn't match that. So in January 2020 at CFA, we agreed to progress concept designs for a consolidated site on one of two sites, and that was for either Loughborough, where we've got existing facilities, or at Desford, where again we've got existing facilities at Caterpillar Novia Logistics site. Issues were identified and risks for both sites, which included some of the dependencies around others vacating the site at Loughborough to accommodate all our planning needs, etc. for that particular site. So in terms of the current situation and why the change, I think it was important that we sort of reflected on this, and so training is going to be delivered by the Leicestershire Fire and Rescue Service across two sites, and we sort of categorise that into clean and dirty. as agreed, and that was agreed at Leicester Fire and Rescue Services senior management team meeting in July 2020. Just for clarification for everybody, in terms of dirty, what we mean by that is things like the fire behavioural unit, breathing apparatus, road traffic sort of collision training as well. So carbonaceous burning, that sort of thing going on, and clean being sort of classroom-based training. So things like the virtual reality stuff and the classroom-based training, minus any sort of briefings that go on before the dirty work, driver training and things like that. So very much we were looking in terms of dirty being based at Desford, pending to an agreement with the landlords at Desford, and clean to be based at Loughborough. And this would basically utilise our existing infrastructure, minimise the costs, which we'd recognised back in January to be excessive against the budgets that we had. And Desford, we're currentently in progress with heads of terms, and we're currently being drafted during this month, actually. So they're all sort of moving forward at a pace. A little bit in terms of the current situation and why the change. I think it's fair to say that we'd recognised that there was insufficient space at both sites. In essence, the identified risks and barriers to progression of the project since the last report, there was no longer an option to consider that single consolidated site. Other occupants at Loughborough, for instance, the site that you'll see the site plan there of Loughborough. You can see that we've got a land assembly project there to make sure there's enough room. So you've got the ambulance service, East Mids Ambulance Service, you've got Western Powers Utilities Yard, and you've got a local authority depot, which has still got some demand and continued use requirements. So the difficulties in assembling that site to make it a comprehensive single site were both costly and too complex to be able to progress in the sort of timescales given. In terms of Desford as well, the requirement for land there has changed. So we initially required a 5-acre site to put exactly what we wanted as a single facility. Unfortunately, they could only offer us 2.5 acres. So, the benefits that this still gives us is using the sort of split site. It does maximise utilisation of the current site that we've got at Loughborough. So utilises the safe space we've got there. And it also recognises that Loughborough site has little value due to its restricted access that you can see there off Epinal Way, and the proximity of the other uses, the ambulance service, etc., and the shared access going through there. It's fair to say that Loughborough site at the moment is over provisioned, so there's reduced crew levels going into the actual fire station there. So there's actual opportunity to sort of develop that as well. So we do believe that sort of following a split site or the split site decision, the existing learning development could free up more space actually. It also provides us two goals in a single action really. So it does provide us the learning development facility, which is obviously a multi-million-pound capital works project if it comes to fruition. But it also recognises that in the estate strategy we identified further work at Loughborough Fire Station to be undertaken. And what this enables us to do is utilise the over-provision in Loughborough Fire Station and actually undertake some of that work. So it does give us an efficiency of scale by doing those works at the same time, probably saving us around £1 million worth of refurbishment costs. Also gives us the opportunity to reuse porta cabins, etc. It does remove risk as well. So the site identified is already identified. It's ours. The budgets that we have, and I know Alison's on the line, but I think we've got £6 million approximately on this. So it's more aligned to that. And it also feeds into the planning constraints we are all too aware of at the Loughborough site around carbonaceous burning and the use of the existing fire training unit and any potential future use of fire behavioural units going forward on this site. So we have been busy in the period. We have been doing quite a bit of investigation to try and prove the concept and move things forward. And so in terms of that, as I said before, Loughborough Fire Station has too much metre squareage now for the actual crewing levels that it currently provides for. And we've now actually gone through that capturing of that over provision, and we can draw up plans now to sort of repurpose part of that fire station as part of the L&D functions. At first assessment, there was not enough spare square metres capacity for the learning development, but through a schedule of accommodation, I think through the 2 sites, it's been agreed that with operational training teams not yet challenged or accepted by other senior LFS personnel. But having said that, I think we need to accept that there's a degree of replication, things like showers, kitchens, classrooms, but I don't think we can afford a market consolidation of further sites on that. I think we need to just dwell on the fact that the UK and the US-based Caterpillar senior management team are also in agreement in principle with us taking space there. Heads of terms are in discussion with our legal advisors, and hopefully we can go on during September to sort of secure that confirmed arrangement for a localised agreement with Caterpillar for 2.5 acres going forward. Just worth mentioning that Leicestershire County Council's legal advisors are supporting the fire service in that process. In terms of the main project risks, obviously, as we touched on before, the Desford heads of terms are not yet agreed, although we are advancing them. H block at Desford, we do know that we need to do something with that. At the moment, I think it expires, the localised agreement, sort of in 2021. So we do need to do something there. We have a contingency plan in terms of Kendrew Barracks, but if we did have to trigger that relocation of that facility for a short period of time, it would actually be additional capital costs as well. So we want to try and get things nailed down before that period, in principle at least. And then obviously we've got planning conditions over the development of Loughborough as well. We're all too aware of the conditions that put in place for the Loughborough site and the proximity of the local neighbours in that area. So in terms of where we come to in recommendations, there's and I'm sure the chair may touch on these as well. There's a few items just to touch on. The split site, as I said earlier in the presentation, has already been agreed by Leicester Fire and Rescue Services senior management team back in July. And whilst you all should be made completely aware of that, I don't think it's sort of CFA sort of statutory consultee on that. It's just more a case of just asking to take note that that's the case. I'd like just to recognise the good work that Leicestershire County Council legal team are continuing to do in terms of supporting the heads of terms for the Desford lease acquisition, and also provide a further report to the CFA in December, just to progress matters. Obviously, at the moment, it's quite a critical time. And before I finish, it's just in terms of costs, because I'm all too aware of the overall costs. The reason we were looking at between 6 and 11.5 million pound capital works scheme in the report previously. If we do enable the split site project, what we're forecasting and anticipating at the moment is costs around 4 to 6 million, dependent on the level of work that we do at Loughborough Fire Station and the outcome of the land negotiation that we're currently going through at Desford. So you can see and start appreciating the sort of significant cost reduction based on the split site option that actually makes it a viable scheme and aligns it to the budgets that we've got in terms of the fire service at the moment. So that brings a conclusion to my presentation. Happy to take questions around the presentation or the paper, Chair.
Great. Anything to add, Callum?
No, nothing to add really. I think Matt's covered all the prominent areas quite well, but obviously if there are any operational questions, I'll help Matt in answering them, Chairman.
Sure. Well, the only person I've got with questions, as far as I can see at the moment, is John Coxon. Big John. No, he's not there. So anybody else? Any questions from you, Betty, because it's Loughborough? Microphone on, Betty. Okay, Dan, I've got you. Microphone on, Betty.
I pressed the button by mistake. I haven't got a question. Sorry.
Go ahead, Betty. Betty, we can't hear you. Still can't hear you, Betty.
Sorry, I don't have any questions.
Okay. Dan?
Right, thank you, Chairman. I think it's a first-class report.
Yes.
It's very realistic. It's where we are. We're scaled by monies and what we can afford and what we can do. We'd all love the idea of drive through the gateway and everything's there all in one spot. But in the real world, that's not really what we're able to do. And I think you explained it really well, Matt, and run us through the sheets extremely well. And I think that's where we are. And I would congratulate you on your report and think that's going to be a good progress, our way we can move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so now to speak. So we've got some recommendations. We note the scaling back from a single consolidated site, the incorporation of the Loughborough Fire and Rescue Station into the project, and a further report was presented to the CFA in December 2020. So you can see the recommendations. If I move them, will you second them, Corwinder? Your microphone's off, Corwinder.
Apologies. Yeah, I second them. Thank you.
Thank you. So can I just see a show of hands in favour? Thank you. Okay, so next one is agenda item 9 is a day clearing plus duty system. This is on 163 to 170 of your agenda pack. Callum's going to run us through it. So we'll do Callum's stuff first and then Callum will answer questions. So Callum, over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. This is only a relatively brief update report for members, just to update you on the actions we've taken following the meeting on the 29th of July and the Combined Fire Authority's decision around our stance of Day Crewing Plus. It's only a brief update, but it's quite a positive one, if I'm honest. Following that CFA meeting, we've now agreed a joint statement with the Fire Brigade Union, which is really positive for two reasons. It suspends the ongoing trade dispute that the union had lodged with the service on the 14th of June 2019. And it also provides a very good document that we've forwarded to the Health and Safety Executive, which in all likelihood will reduce or remove the likelihood of them taking any enforcement action against the service under the working time regulations. I haven't yet received the confirmation back from the Health and Safety Executive that that's the case, but it's very likely that at some point we'll get that. So it's a really positive step forward for the service. We're now meeting with the Fire Brigade Union to jointly agree the heads of terms of reference for the working group, and it's envisaged the working group will get underway in early November this year. All the staff working on the Day Crew Plus system have been communicated with, and whilst they are a little disappointed, they are understanding and accepting of the situation, and they're fully aware of the timescales involved. As and when the joint working group comes up with any kind of recommendations, those will be presented back to the authority. So just for clarity and to confirm and to assure members that any proposals that alter fire cover or provision of service will come back to the Combined Fire Authority before any for your decision and ratification, and anything that does involve a change in service provision will be consulted on with public under the IRMP consultation process in 2024. Happy to take any questions, Chairman.
I can't see any, Callum. We've had this many times. Oh, I've got two now. So I'll go with the Vice Chairman first, Corwinder.
Yeah, apologies. Can you just clarify the working group, the constitution of that, the FBU plus others? Did you say? Sorry.
Yes, that's correct. Through positive and healthy discussions with the Fire Brigade Union, they have agreed that the service will be represented, as you'd expect, the Fire Brigade Union and indeed a Fire Officers Association member as well, so that we're able to get the full views and opinions of all the representative bodies that are involved.
Okay, that's brilliant. Appreciate that. Thank you. And I think that will be a good working group.
Great, Corwinder. Bill?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Very briefly. As some of these officers will be affected by this change in their working circumstances, in that some will be financially put in hardship because of the changes to their circumstances, are we taking any measures and speaking to them about what their views are going to be in the future, whether they're going to stay with the fire service or whether they're going to move on to other pastures?
Yes, certainly. So as I mentioned earlier, we have been out to communicate with all the Day Crew Plus stations and the staff working that. The rather positive time period that we're looking at is probably introduction not until 2025. So those staff members have got an opportunity to plan what their future looks like and consider what they want to do. Equally, in that time, we have the other compounding issue around the pensions case and the outcome, which may see up to 30% of those staff look to retire at that point anyway. We would hope and will work as hard as we can do to stop any of our valuable staff leaving the service. But I think, to be fair, it will be an individual choice for those people at that time and their life status really at that time. But we'd be keen not to lose any staff, as they're a really valuable resource for us.
Indeed, there's nothing much we can do except go with this, isn't it, Callum? I mean, we are where we are. It's a shame, really, because the guys and ladies that actually use it like it, but we're stuck with that court decision. So the recommendations, I move that the CFA notes the update provided on the day crewing plus duty system. Do you want a second, Corwinder?
I'll second that, Chair.
So just a quick show of hands.
Agreed.
Thank you very much. All right, 10. This report is service identity. It's the badge again. This is on 171 to 176 of your agenda pack. And we're going straight over to, oh yeah, somebody's sharing the screen here. Over to you again, Callum.
Thank you, Chairman. So as I've kind of just alluded to, actually, in answering that question, one of our key assets in delivering an excellent service is our staff and the staff that represent us on a daily basis. This paper has been generated by and focused on their opinions and their pride in the service, and their repeated request over quite a few years to reinstate the service identity, i.e. a badge back across the service. I wasn't present over a decade ago when the badge was removed, but I'm led to believe it's relatively unpopular that it was removed. And in 2016, a large consultation went across the service asking for staff's views and opinion. That pretty much unanimously came back that they were really keen to see a badge reintroduced to the service. And whilst we're still waiting the full analysis of the staff engagement survey we've just completed, it's really clear in the overarching statements and the headlines that staff are still really keen that a badge is reintroduced. So on the face of that should be a relatively easy thing to do, to put the badge back onto the shirts of uniforms. As with most things in life, it didn't turn out to be quite that simple, as the old badge that we had that in your paper is listed as badge 1 had been used throughout the service, but it doesn't fully represent the Rutland area in that badge. And we'd be keen as a service that when we move forward, we are able to fully represent Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland. To get to that position, to get a badge through the Heraldry Commission is going to take a reasonable amount of time, a considerable amount of time. It's not unachievable. It does incur an additional cost of around £13,250. So option 3 is the preferred option that I'm proposing to the authority to consider. And why I'm proposing option 3 is that we would immediately look to re-establish the previous badge with immediate effect. That will show that we value the staff's opinion. We want to empower them in having pride in the service and delivering the excellent community service that we do. Whilst we go through the period with the Heraldry Commission to get the new badge that represents Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland approved. Once that's approved, we would look for that badge to be the long-term identity for the service. I'm conscious that I've talked quite quickly through there. It is all contained in the paper, and I'm sure there'll be questions over this, which I'm more than happy to answer. Thank you, Chairman.
Oh, thank you. Well, Leicestershire are happy with it. You've consulted City Mayor, he's happy with it. It's just what you think, Ken.
No, I have to say the acting chief has fully involved us, Chairman, and all the way through, completely happy. I think it's a positive way forward.
Okay, so I'll just move the recommendations A, B, C, and if Colwinder will second.
I'll second them, yeah.
Could I ask a question, please?
Who is that? Sorry, is that you?
Sue, yeah, I was trying to raise
Sue.
my hand but wasn't sure how to go about it. The question I had is when the new badges are introduced, will it be done gradually so that people with existing uniforms will only get the new badge when they need to have a new set of uniform, or will existing uniforms just be disposed of?
I bet it's so on. Where are you, Callum?
I'm here, yep. Thank you, Councillor Barton. If approved by the authority, the badge would only be immediately reinstated on the shirts that are uniformed shirts. As and when we then look to get the new badge approved through heraldry, that would then move on to jumpers, jackets, etc., etc. So the first iteration would be a very minimal rollout of the badge, but showing respect to our staff. The lifespan of shirts is probably in the region of let's say 2.5 years, particularly for firefighters as they go through a bit of rough and tumble and sturdy wear. So the initial rollout would be relatively minimal, and then we wouldn't, as and when we then got the second badge approved, we would then look to roll that out far and wide. So we wouldn't have, for any particular period of time, a mixture of badges for the service that's on display, if that answers your question.
Okay, is that okay with you, Sue?
Thank you, that's fine.
Great, so moved and seconded, all in favour?
Aye.
Perfect, thank you. We now have this report on service delivery, 177 to 182 of your agenda. Over to you, Callum.
Sorry, Chairman, just struggling with the mute button. This is a brief update around service delivery, and I think it's fair to say it's been a significantly challenging period for the service. Obviously, with the disruption and the impact of COVID across our communities, it has impacted the service that we've delivered. Some of that is incredibly positive, and some of that is not so positive. But I am proud of what we've achieved as a service and as a team in how we've responded to what I believe is going to be a very defining period for the service. So on the positive front, the impacts of COVID has seen that incidents have declined by approximately 350 to 400 incidents over that time. So that's about an 11% drop. Our on-call appliance availability has rapidly risen to just in excess of 82%, up from the low 60s. Our staff sickness rate has significantly dropped and attendance times have improved throughout the period. However, the other side of that is that the number of home fire safety checks we've been able to complete has fallen, as simply with people locked away, we haven't been able to gain access to the houses in a safe and controlled fashion, and nor have they wanted us in during COVID. The number of fire protection visits and audits that we've conducted has dropped, and that's simply because where businesses were furloughed or closed, we haven't been able to go out and inspect and audit them. And our general interactions with the public has dropped. So as you'd expect with schools closed, we weren't able to go out to schools to deliver road safety advice, general other safety advice. We've responded as a service fantastically, and we've made some impressive innovation during that time, which means we are now able to deliver most, if not all, of those activities in different and safe and COVID compliant ways. But it'd be remiss of me not to inform you that some of that performance has dropped a little bit. Paragraph 13 of the report shows some of the additional work we've undertaken to support the Local Resilience Forum and local authorities during COVID. And it's kind of a really positive example of where the service is stepping up and filling the gaps where other agencies either have been overrun or haven't had the capacity to do things, and we've been able to support them and help them. So really positive perspective from the fire service. And I'd like to say that's continuing. Even now, we're receiving new requests for different activities, which we're progressing and undertaking really well. Paragraph 14 is a really small note that really doesn't represent the sheer amount of work that's been undertaken by a few officers who've really committed their life to dealing with COVID and making sure the service is delivering really well and being represented really well. So my appreciation goes out to them. And members can still rest assured that whenever we've been needed during COVID or outside of COVID, we've responded to all incidents in a really positive, professional and honest way. And some of those examples are shown in paragraph 15. I'm sure members will be aware last night saw a number of announcements by the government around COVID, and we're still responding to that and making sure that we remain COVID compliant, both for our staff and the community. And I think the only thing I will say that is, as the length of COVID continues and the measures continue to change and adapt, that may impact further on our service delivery. But I do want members to be assured we have a great team of individuals working for us, and we're really trying to reach out and minimise the impact of fire and rescue related activities and COVID for the community. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Callum. Any questions to Callum?
No.
Okay, I'll just go ahead and move the recommendations A, B and C, and if you can second them, Coinder.
I'll second them, Chair.
All happy?
Yeah.
Yes.
Very good. Item 12 is the annual report, statement of assurance of annual equality report. This is on 183 to 246, and it's back over to you, Callum.
Thank you, Chairman. The publication of the IRMP and Statement of Assurance is a statutory requirement under the Fire and Rescue Services National Framework, and this paper is the sign-off for the authority to fulfil that requirement. It had been planned to also present the annual quality report at this meeting. It's regretful I'm not able to present that now due to a culmination of circumstances of the post holder leaving, the disruption of COVID, meaning it was very difficult to recruit a replacement. Really happy to say we have now recruited that replacement, and I asked the authorities permission to defer that report until December, so the new post holder is able to really influence that report and demonstrate the positive action that she's undertaking at the moment. The annual report that also follows on contains a number of other activities undertaken and required for reporting, such as health and safety executive framework and operational performance. So ultimately, it's the authority's opportunity to sign these documents off to fulfil the statutory requirements. The only one change that will be made is subject to us receiving the sign-off of the accounts. The link in the annual statement will then be changed to represent the up-to-date link for that statement of assurance.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman.
Betty's our go-to person for this, so Betty.
Hello, yes, just to say that I spent the day interviewing candidates for Equalities Officer. It'll be a joint, the responsibilities will be much wider than equalities. I have to say I was very impressed with the calibre of the candidates, as I was on another set of interviews that I did. And I think that the new person, I cannot quite remember her name at the moment, the new person coming in to do the job will bring a lot to the authority in terms of her abilities. Thank you.
Thank you, Betty. So shall I just move the recommendations A and B, and will you second them, Coinder?
Yes, Chair, I'll second them.
Quick show of hands. Thank you. So the final report is the appointment of independent persons. This is 247 to 250 of your agenda pack, and the supplementary report is also circulated to you. We've got Lauren Haslam from the County Council, who's the monitoring officer, to present. Lauren.
Good morning, members. Good morning. Yes, can I refer members, please, to the supplementary report? The report in the pack is really just a holding report to get this item on the agenda. The Localism Act requires the council to appoint independent persons and the CFA as well. The purpose is twofold, really, to support the member complaint process and to support the procedures for the dismissal of various statutory officers. In June, the Corporate Governance Committee agreed to undertake a joint appointment process and with the County Council to benefit really from the economies of scale and the efficiency that presented. A public advert was placed and current independent persons were invited to reapply. Two did so, the others decided to stand down. There was an interview process which took place, and we were fortunate that members of the CFA were present. I think four of the interview panel were CFA members, so we're able to contribute very helpfully to the process. And the Corporate Governance Committee considered the outcome of that process recently and recommended to the CFA the appointment of the 6 individuals identified in paragraph 2, Richard Goff, Gordon Grimes, Tina Herring, Hema Katecha, Surinder Sharma and Pamela Roberts to serve as independent persons for a term of 4 years, starting at the end of this month, Chair. That completes my presentation. There's not a great deal to say.
No, well, thank you for that, Lauren. So I've got no speakers, so we're moving the recommendations on the order paper, and if you can second it, Coinder.
I will second that, Chair, but what I'll also say is that I was part of that process with the interviews, and I think that the persons that we've appointed, they do fit the role. They've gone through a due process, and I'm very pleased, one with the process, but secondly with the people appointed. So I'll second that.
Okay, just a quick show of hands then. Thank you, Lauren.
Thank you, Chair.
Moving on, urgent action is number 14. We don't have any urgent items. So the date of the next meeting is the 16th of December, and it will be via Microsoft Teams because I don't think things will have changed significantly by then. So having said that, thank you all of you for your attendance, and goodbye.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Goodbye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Very well chaired. Thanks.
Bye.